October meeting.
Yes, do you have it?
Logan-Cache. Logan-Cache. Now it's green. Glad to have you here. We appreciate your interest in the airport. Begin by calling for a motion to approve the minutes of the August meeting as provided.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from the August 1st meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Bob, tell us what's been happening.
Well, good morning, everybody. So we've had the FAA in town again, following up on the 139 inspection that happened in June. And we've got good things to report there. I'd like to kind of highlight some of the things my staff has been doing. So I've got one of them here today, but Valerie Black, she's at the airport this morning doing the inspection. And she's been assigned to work on our Title VI program. Once our Title VI program is complete, we'll be one of the first airports in the state to have that completed. She's working almost exclusively on that Title VI program in conjunction with Lochner and their consultant. So that's a big project that is moving forward, and we're ahead of the game on that. She also helps with the daily inspections and documentation of discrepancies and the repair of discrepancies there on the airport. Casey Maxwell, the second employee, he would be here this morning, but he's supervising a construction project at the airport right now where we're coming into compliance with an issue that the FAA brought up, where we're running continuous power to our auxiliary windsock on the north end of the airfield, and he's up there supervising that. He's also been instrumental this summer of keeping the wildlife habitat mowed and clear of weeds, cutting the grass. Really is good at identifying things that need to happen at the airport and taking the initiative to get with me and plan for those things. He interfaces well with me, the public, with our vendors. He's also been instrumental in organizing a tracking sheet for our maintenance and helping us stay on track with our 139 certification. And I've got the third employee here, Kate. Kate has gone through and digitized our complete ACM. Our airport certification manual was only a hard copy, and we needed to make amendments to it and changes to it. She has completely digitized the whole thing, made those changes. She's created a digital airport discrepancy log sheet so we can track our workers. She's rewritten and helped bring up to date a more current training curriculum for us as staff and for anyone new that comes on. And currently she's now organizing with our EMS and local law enforcement and hospitals. We need to do a review of our safety plan and our emergency plan. We'll be, before the end of the month, doing that, and she is helping to organize that meeting and helping to develop the presentation. So I wanted to highlight these employees that I've brought on as they're all seniors at Utah State in the aviation program, specifically airport management program. But they've been more than helpful, and these projects that I've been able to give them have freed me up to manage the airport. It allowed me to interface more with the tenants, work more on the budget, these types of things. So it's been a wonderful addition to have these three come on and be a part of what's going on. And those are the things I wanted to outline, the progress that we've been able to make with this help in coming into compliance with the 139 discrepancies that we had. Are there any questions?
Well, this sounds really, really good progress and good management. Thank you, Bob.
Yep.
Bob, out of the items the FAA brought to our attention, are there any of them that are still unresolved?
Yes. The construction project that I mentioned that's going on this morning, that is, they wanted continuous power run to, previously we had a solar panel system out there for lighting up the windsock on the north end. After this project is completed, and we're anticipating it being completed by the 15th of this month, that will have continuous power. There are other projects that were large in nature with short time frames, such as repainting everything and with additional paint that we don't currently have. We've come to an agreement with the FAA that we'll do as much as we can. They wanted that done by this fall. That wasn't something that we could accomplish with the funds that we have. So we've come to an agreement with them that we'll do as much as we can this fall, and then we'll work on finishing it up next year. So that's still out there. This review of our emergency plan was another item that we're planning to complete. So there's a couple loose ends like those things that we're tying up, but we're moving in the right direction with all of them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you, Bob.
Yep.
Bob, why don't you come back and talk about your experience with the hangar site lease?
Okay. So I've talked to a lot of people. So as I present this, these aren't, that reminds me, I should turn my volume off. I always try to do that, but I forget sometimes. These are ideas gathered from board members, from the Logan City attorney, from tenants. So as I go through these things, a lot of these ideas are from other people that I've included in here, kind of a distilled version of what other people have said. We were going to have it up on here. We don't have the correct adapter, so I'll just have to vocalize here. So the first change that was recommended to me was, instead of billing for the size of the hangar, the dimensions of the hangar, was to bill for the total site that the hangar is on. So the property line of what the hangar is, each site would be the dimensions of the lot instead of the hangar size on there. So I've put that in there. Previously, or our current lease agreement has that the lease agreement will increase by a set amount each year. It was recommended to me that we should change that and have the increased amount be tied with the Social Security cost of living percentage rate each year. So we would just go to the government website, what is the cost of living for the year, then that would be the number that we would use to increase the rents that year. So we would currently we're at 22 cents per square foot. According to UDOT's aviation department, the average rate for land leases in the state is 43 cents a square foot. So we're less than half of what most airports in the state are charging, and we've gotten behind somehow. And so this recommendation that we tie our increases to the cost of living increase could help us stay more in line with what the average is. In the rent section, line 4, it currently says there's a one-time hookup fee of $1,000. This is for a new hangar. One-time hookup fee of $1,000. We've added, or the current city connection fee, whichever is greater. So if the connection fee is greater than the $1,000 that was previously in here, then that tenant would be liable to cover the whole cost of hooking up. So we've just made that language change there. In line number 5, we've just made the clarification that it says here, lessee shall be responsible for all utility services, charges, costs, and installation and maintenance. We've added in there a clarifying sentence. Utility services include, but are not limited to, water, sewer, power, gas, and telecommunications. Just added what it is expected to cover. On to the next page. So this is under the terms in the C section, line 2. The lease may be renewed under the same terms and conditions. That was added. It used to say it can be renewed, but it was recommended that this recommendation was by the Logan City Attorney. He said lease may be renewed under the same terms and conditions for an additional 10-year term by leasee giving the leaser advanced written notice at least 180 days prior of the expiration of the initial term of the lease. So this is giving the opportunity to renew the lease under the same terms and conditions that they were in before. On line 3, it says the lease may be terminated by either party upon written notice given at least 180 days. That used to say 6 months. The reason we changed it to 180 days is because all other timelines within the lease were a day period. There was never a 3-month period or a 6-month period or a 12-month period. It was always a 30-day period, a 60-day period. We wanted to remain consistent, so we changed that from 6 months to 180 days, just to clean up the language. On restrictions, line 1, it says the premises use must be devoted to housing and maintaining aircraft and aviation-related equipment. That's almost exactly what it said before, but then we moved closer to the back here. So now I'm in the indemnification and liability insurance section, line 2. And this was a suggestion from the Logan City Attorney. And it relates to the insurance coverage that the tenant should have. It used to say if the tenant had a fuel tank at their hangar, they should have $1 million insurance coverage. I raised the question as I was reviewing, is $1 million enough? And specifically, as I discussed with one of the tenants, he mentioned if there was a spill of that fuel, the cost could be considerably higher than $1 million to clean up the spill when it came to digging and removing the contamination. So that's how that discussion started. The city attorney has recommended that not only people that are storing fuel, but he recommends every hangar owner or hangar tenant should have insurance. He's recommending general liability coverage of $1 million and an aggregate of $2 million. I included this in here because it was recommended by the city attorney. This can be discussed. I recognize that is an increased burden for tenants, and I didn't want to dismiss it on my own because the recommendation came from the city attorney, but that can be discussed, I believe.
On that one, just real quick, Bob, where it was just fuel, if they stored fuel, is the 2 million for the storage of fuel, or it's just in the aggregate?
It's just in the aggregate.
Okay. So individually, $1 million per incident, 2 million in the aggregate.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the fuel? Under section E2, it says fuel is not allowed. So are there some that have fuel tanks?
Right. So this would be for the only one that has a fuel tank is Leading Edge. There's a storage tank over by their new big hangar that they purchased next to the tall tower. There's a hangar there, and then a tank there. That was the only fuel being stored. No one else should have a tank that's storing fuel currently. So
is our concern with the million just the fuel? I mean, if changing the whole lease for one.
I agree.
Anyway, just
Yeah,
seems like that's a lot in a hangar. I mean, obviously, if problem, that becomes an issue. But
I agree. Like I said, I don't necessarily agree or disagree with this. I actually do have an opinion on it, but I wanted to include it in the discussion because it was brought up by the city attorney. My personal take on it is I don't know that we need to have everyone carry that much insurance. That's my personal take on it. But of course, you're the decision makers, but I wanted to have the conversation and see where it leads. Those are the changes that we have. So would you like to discuss the insurance portion?
Before we go that one, I have one other question, and that is are you proposing a rate? I mean, you talked that we have 22 as our current. I'm curious if we took the 22 and applied the cost of the Social Security cost adjustments from what that was to what it is today, what that might be. I don't know whether you've done that math. Probably not.
I haven't.
That's okay. But are you proposing the 43? Is that, did I misunderstand? Is that your proposal?
I think that's a good starting point. I gave it for information because that's how far behind we are as it relates to the average of other lease agreements among the state. So to be fair, there are some lower than 43. There are some higher. Take into account that our 22 cents per square foot is included in that average. So our 22 cents is dragging down, so the average might be even higher if we weren't at 22 cents.
When's the last time we updated from 22 cents?
Well, it increases each year by 2%. So last year we were at, I believe, 20 cents. So,
So that number has been increasing.
yes.
Okay.
But 43 cents seems fair as it relates to other airports and where everyone else is around the state are at.
You have there's no reversionary, I know that there was some talk, there's no reversionary at this, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Chair, I would make a motion, and then we can discuss and modify that motion if that's all right. I'd make a motion to accept the recommended changes by our airport manager, accepting the suggestion of the 43 cents, but striking the 2 million and leaving it at the million that it is. So that would be my,
Clarification.
go ahead.
Is there a second to that motion?
Hold on, just to clarify what you.
So the change also includes not just people that are storing fuel in a tank, but everyone.
Yeah, I think everybody should have insurance on their hangar.
Okay.
I think there should
I just
be-
wanted to make sure you understood that distinction. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to make sure that you.
I think I think going to the 2 million, but having $1 million coverage on a hangar, a fire coverage is, should be fairly standard on most.
The lease, it calls for liability insurance. There is no requirement in the lease or in his proposal for personal fire protection. It's merely a liability figure.
Okay, well, I'll take it, the liability insurance. I'd just make that motion to accept the recommendations, with striking the 2 million. But other than that, that's what my motion would be.
Is there a second?
Just to clarify again, you're saying that the insurance requirement would be liability only?
Sure.
Okay, I'd second that then.
I just wanted to add, we had a fire, it was a couple of years ago, down in the south end of the valley in Hiram in some storage units. And the fire started in one unit and then spread to several other units. And there were no airplanes in those storage units, just household items, a couple of cars, things like that. It was several $1 million in losses, and nobody had insurance there. The property owner who owned the storage unit had insurance on their building, but nobody else had insurance on their contents or anything. Everybody lost. The person who started the fire, I don't know what their liability ended up being, but I'm sure they wished they had insurance. But that was just general storage and ended up being millions of dollars. So I think it's a good idea to have insurance. I did have another question about the rate. 43 cents. I don't know, Mr. Chair, you do real estate. Are you still involved in real estate industry or aware of current lease rates for industrial square footage in our valley? I'm just curious what those rates are as a comparison.
43 cents for industrial use would be low. But that typically applies to income-producing activities. Or if we're comparing it to household storage, it's probably, again, it would be low because we're paying it on an annual basis, and it would be closer to a monthly rate if we're talking about household storage. I'm not sure that because of the limitations on how it's used, and one of the challenges that is expressed in the lease is the non-aviation use. It's much cheaper to store your boat in the hangar that you also have an airplane in than it is to have a separate storage unit for your boat. It makes the airport very attractive for that use, but it violates our agreements with the FAA for funding. and that it has to be spelled out in our leases that it's primarily for the purpose of aviation uses.
That was one of my questions as well. I noticed the language in the agreement in reference to the primary use being for aviation. And I'm curious, just wanted to look and see exactly what that language says. It says, the premises use must be devoted to housing and maintaining aircraft and aviation-related equipment. Peripheral use for storage of other non-hazardous items is allowed. Lessee may not use the premises primarily for non-aviation related purposes. So there are a couple of qualifiers there: devoted, peripheral, and primary. And I'm just curious, how are we going to make that determination if something is primarily used for aviation use and that the other uses are peripheral?
So the examples that I've seen at the airport have been pretty clear. There's one hangar that I witnessed. There was no airplane in it, and it was full of trailers, side-by-sides, lawnmowers, boats. And so that one's obvious. And they've moved all but one of those trailers out, and the airplane's on its way back. But there are others where, it's a huge hangar, there's one airplane, and then the rest is filled with boats and other things. I get 1 or 2 calls a week from people looking for hangars, hangar space, and I have to tell them, we don't have anything. We don't have space. Some of these people that have a large hangar and they're using it to store other things, they could be charging rent to folks that want to that need hangar space, but instead they've chosen boats and motor homes and those sorts of things.
So in general, is the threshold going to be that at least 50% or 75%? Is there going to be some kind of a percentage that we'll use? I'm just wondering if we need to be more specific in this lease document, or do you feel like the language that is here is specific enough to allow you to enforce it?
I'm open to suggestions on that. I think from what I've seen, people that want to comply are complying. There's an airplane, there's a set of tools, there's parts, there's, it's almost, 75% of what's in the hangar is aviation related. Yeah, okay, they've got their snowblower back there, or there's room in the back for a trailer or an old car, okay. But it's primarily being used for this airplane. But I'm open for suggestions there. If anyone from the public has a suggestion, I'm open. I just
want to make sure that it's strong enough that you can enforce it. And maybe Jairus, our attorney, is here. I'm curious if you have an opinion on the enforceability of the current language. If there's something that maybe is questionable and our airport manager thinks it's too much non-aviation use and wants them to change it, but they make an argument that it's primarily used for an airplane because there's an airplane there. Do you think this language is strong enough for us to be able to enforce that?
Yeah, I was, as you're talking, or before you were even asking on this, I was thinking about, okay, what do those words mean and what would it allow? The way that it is written, it does allow some flexibility from for the airport manager to interpret that. Other things that you would look at is what is generally acceptable at other airports, and you could use that to, I think, have a fairly strong argument on what is primary use and what is peripheral. Those are actually pretty good words, in my opinion, to allow someone to say, hey, a trailer, when you've got 3 planes in a large hangar, or even a large plane in a particular hangar, that sounds reasonable. But unfortunately, as attorneys often say, it can come to a point where it's just a case-by-case basis. And so it almost might be worth just seeing how this works in the meantime. And if it does become difficult and there are a lot of challenges to that wording, then maybe revisiting the wording at a later point. But I do feel like there's a fair amount of strength in primary and peripheral, and allowing the airport to determine what that means exactly. And it also opens it up to conversations with those who own the hangars, right? So that you can have discussions with them, and I think that's where you're going to have your most success, because you want to have those discussions before they challenge it legally.
Okay, thank you.
To give you a little perspective, and we've maybe brought this up before, but about 5 years ago, the FAA came out with a policy that actually forbid any non-aircraft use of a hangar, would not even allow you space for a desk for you to do flight planning. They found that not to be particularly practical. And 2 years ago, they backed away from that, and the FAA went with the word primary in their guidelines. Judd and I were talking before the meeting. We had the opportunity at our UAO meetings to visit a hangar, a very famous hangar that was devoted almost entirely to non-aviation uses. It was obvious. There was a car wrapping business being conducted. There was 2 mobile homes that were being renovated, and there was an airplane stuck in the back corner in each of the spaces. But it was obvious that the primary function in this particular hangar that we were invited into was non-aviation. So the attorney's comment that, yes, it is a judgment on the part of the manager, but clearly, in most cases, that's a fairly easy judgment to make, because the bulk of the hangars are being used for aviation purposes. And one I'm familiar with is primarily used to support the operation of a Baja racing program. It's clear that in most cases that if primary use is not aviation, then that discussion with the owner needs to take place.
That makes me think of some potential additional language that we might need. So what if the FAA were to change their regulations next year and made them more strict than what we have? Do we need language in our lease to allow for that, or would that be automatically imposed because it's an FAA regulation? Would we be in a position where we'd have conflicting requirements, where maybe our lease says you can do it, but the FAA says you can't? Just wondering if we need to have some kind of language in there that would allow for that.
Certainly that would be a possibility. From a practical standpoint, the discussion, the FAA guidelines are this: we need you to comply. I'm not going to comply. Then take this as your 180-day notice that we're canceling the lease. So we do have recourse within the current language.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that we can anticipate all of the eventualities that might occur that would impact this.
To that point, we may need to modify the lease if the FAA comes back and modifies their requirements. Generally, we would be able to modify our lease as long as we don't continue our lease beyond their change of requirement. So,
We have currently a split lease between those on the flight line and the rest of the hangars. Do you want to discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, I did have a recommendation from somebody that the rent for people on the flight line be 10 cents higher than the rest of the leases. And that would be to cover for the snow removal that goes right up to their hangar door and the pavement maintenance that that occurs for them. So it was proposed that a set amount for people off the flight line and a 10-cent increase for those on the flight line.
so is this average that you've mentioned, is that either one of those? So that this must be in between that, or is this kind of, would you expect that this would be changed by that? I'm just kind of curious.
So the recommendation that I received was 37 cents for off the flight line, 47 cents if you're on the flight line. And that falls right in line with the average of 43 cents, about right in the middle. So, but you guys can discuss that and decide that.
Further discussion from the board.
I'm fine for that amendment. If somebody wants to amend the motion for that, that would be fine.
To make it 47 cents,
47 on the line
Flight
and 37 off.
43 off.
37 off and 47 on, I think you said.
Is that what you said, Bob?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could go with that.
Friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment. And second,
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Let's give members of the audience an opportunity to add comments. We appreciate the number of you who have reached out to Bob over the last couple of weeks to give suggestions. He indicated that it's been very helpful in his preparing this recommendation. Does anyone wish to speak to it?
call for a vote.
Okay, we'll call for a vote. All in favor of accepting the new lease at 37 cents for non-flight line and 47 cents for flight line with the suggested amendments as presented today. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. There are no opposed. Thank you for your support. It's going to be a busy year next summer. Can I change it just a little bit because and not get to the summer? Tell us about paint. He has it? Okay. He's going to do it all, okay.
We can all come up. I could. Sorry, I forgot to bring this to you earlier. Sorry. My apologies. Judd Hill with Lochner, your planning and engineering firm. Also have Connor Butterfield and Dylan Peterson. So Connor's Utah State lead and Dylan is one of our airport planners. I was Utah State lead, but now I oversee the whole Northwest Mountain region. So, probably run it right off there. So the next item up for discussion was the capital improvement projects. This is the CIP. This is the long-term plan generally speaking, it's about a 10-year plan looking forward, and it's a way to kind of budget for local, state, and federal funds. In terms of the federal funding, just to recap for everyone, since some of y'all may not be aware, the airport has entitlement funding as a general aviation airport, basically non-commercial service airport. It's $150,000 a year is allocated as potentially available. Obviously, more funds can be achieved through different pots of federal money. For example, a big runway project is going to cost way more than that. It's more than 10 times the cost of that. And it's using other pots of federal money. In addition to the entitlement funding, there was an additional pot of money that was brought out in '22. It was the bill funding, or AIG funding. It was the bill for bipartisan infrastructure law, the airport improvement grant program. And with that, it was $295,000, give or take. It fluctuates annually, but roughly $295,000 a year was allocated to the airport that could be used or saved up for larger projects at the airport. And so that's what would be considered bill funding. And then there's also the potential for state-funded projects, and then obviously local projects. An example of the local project, Bob's been working a lot to get the compliance you've had for over a decade or more of working solar-powered light on the north wind cone, but the FAA came in this year and said, that's not going to work anymore. So you need to make it hardwired power. So that's something that's just being done with local type funding. With this, nice and small, this is a screenshot of a program called Logan-Cache. It's a new program that the UDOT Aeronautics Department brought up this past year for tracking capital improvements. And might actually work better if I don't have it as a presentation, so we can actually zoom in on particular projects. And zooming out first, we're basically looking at projects over the next 10 years of reconstruction. The very top, you can't see it. I'll run through these and then we can zoom in. But the electric vehicle charger that was acquired this past year, reconstruct taxiway Charlie, potential for snow removal equipment, taxi lane India, paint for the runway, and then future for the taxiway, pavement preservation, snow removal equipment building, then 2 years of taxiway Bravo, designing it for reconstruction, then reconstructing taxiway Bravo, that's out in 2030. Additional pavement preservation, and then looking at runway rehab. Yes, the runway was done a couple of years ago, but those get addressed. You want to be looking at addressing a road and a runway about every 10, 15 years. And so this is looking 10 years out. So it'd be 12, 13 years out from when the runway was done. So even though it's great and you have a great runway right now, it's a very large, those kind of projects are very large. So you want to start planning a decade plus out because of the amount of funding that's going to be required for projects like that. So that's kind of in the big overview. Like I said, this is a screenshot out of the FAA's, but going into a little greater detail on, and I'll probably have Connor come up because he's been doing all of the work on the paint project. So, yeah, if you want to come up, Connor, but to refresh, the runway's shown some chipping of paint, but the FAA inspector came out and said, hey, you need to change your paint. Right now you have white lines on a runway. Now it says you want white lines surrounded by black paint. And then he also made a point of, you have a taxiway center line. He now wants taxiway edge markings. And it's kind of, that comes down to a chicken and the egg scenario. You have, Bob and Kate have been working hard on the airport certification manual. One of the appendices of that is the sign and marking plan. So that's the FAA's plan that says you have to have your airport marked out to look like this. So the paint on your runway, short of the chipping or the flaking off that happened with some of the paint, but the paint that's on there is exactly as what is in the FAA-approved airport certification manual. New inspector came along and said, you have to add these different components in, such as the taxiway edge markings and putting black around the white markings on the runway. So if you immediately painted those, then you're out of compliance with the FAA manual. So it really is the left hand not talking to the right hand of the FAA and saying you have to have these edge markings on a taxiway. If you put the edge markings on the taxiway, then you're in non-compliance with your airport certification manual that they've been doing. It's the FAA for you. Working through a plan, and that Bob has really been working hard on, of developing this plan.
So have we written them a letter and said, how do you propose we resolve this?
Connor has had more calls than you can imagine.
Yeah, so like Jeff was saying, it was interesting. The approved manual says paint it this way. So I was under the assumption that we design a project, paint it back as it was. The inspector says, no, you need black paint. So we came to an agreement that this year we will paint as much as possible with the funding that we have. So we're able to get the FAA happier with us to comply with Part 139 by painting this year what we have. So we have a project to paint just the runway this year with the funding that the state was able to provide.
So because of this, the state, for y'all that don't know, it's been a lot of work by Bob and by John working with UDOT Aeronautics to get funding that wasn't allocated, but they were able to go to the Transportation Commission with the state and make some funding come available in the short term. Normally what would be on a plan for 2, 3, 4+ years, or the case of that spreadsheet, you saw 10 years out that they're planning, they were able to make some money up here this year. And that's going to go towards it's going to be painting the runway aspects of this that the FAA had brought up. With that, we'll have the full plan sets out for review. I don't want to promise it this week because it's Thursday and we got some other stuff, but it's either going to be probably tomorrow or beginning of next week. Those plans will be going out for the state's final review and then sending that project out to bid. So we'll be seeing that. From the pilot's perspective, when that project does happen, it'll take a couple of days for that project to happen. That will require a runway shutdown. Obviously, if you're got painting trucks on the runway, and this would be the 1735. So crosswind would still be available, and obviously with the university, the schedule of any potential charter flights coming and going, we'll be mindful of that when it comes to the scheduling of the actual construction. But
So yeah, in short, we're able to make the FAA happy by getting a project done to get the runway up beyond the manual that says how we should paint it. We're going to do it better than they say to make them happy this year, and then come back in the spring and do the taxiways.
And then work with the airport to rewrite that manual, because after it gets painted, you'll now be non-compliant with the FAA. So, FAA 101. We're not happy until you're not happy. So any questions on the paint? Okay. The next project scheduled up is been planning this with the state for a couple of years, and funding is now coming available, and this is Taxiway Charlie. So just as a refresher, there's very good asphalt on the kind of the southeast side and leading into the apron and into what is technically Alpha on the apron. Great pavement. The northwest side of Taxiway Charlie is a really nice gravel road that needs to be rehabilitated. It definitely significantly impacts any kind of operations in the winter, because if you plow that, you're going to destroy your plow. You're going to it's not a functional. It actually, when you look at pavement on an airport, it actually has a specific number. It's called a Pavement Classification Index, PCI, and it ranges from 0 to 100. Below 60 is failing, and this asphalt, I think, is a 5. So it is failed asphalt, and this is going to be a state-only funded project and we'll be designing it this year, putting it out to bid in the spring, and then looking for construction in the springtime, early summer next year.
Is this a total removal of asphalt and repave?
It'll be classified as a rehabilitation. So the anticipated work geotech, it's been sent out, but we haven't. Yeah. So a lot of it will depend on geotech, but we're pretty certain based off of past projects out there. What it'll consist of is, right now you've got the asphalt with the base course and then the sub base. We'll likely anticipated, but we won't know until geotech is done, mill up all of the asphalt plus X number of inches of base material. I don't know if that's going to be 2, 4, 6, some measure. This is the likely scenario of milling up all of those together. That material will then be recompacted and used as the new base course material, and then repaved over that. So you could call it a mill and overlay is the anticipated route of it. We won't know for certain until geotech is completed. And so we hope, like I said, we'll have a scope coming out for this, and hopefully that we can get signed and approved so we can hit the ground running. We'd like to get that geotech done sometime in the next month or two, obviously, but just before it gets totally covered in snow.
Have you ever used cement injection into this kind of a process?
So a cement treated materials, that would fall under, so this material doing that milling would be a P207 is the method. The cement treated would be used for a sub base. That's a P156 is the technical term of it. And that will be determined if we need that based off of the geotech. And that's going to be a cement treated sub base. So usually that comes into place with the sub base material. It technically doesn't provide, specifically if you read the specification, it does not provide any additional strength, although it technically kind of does. It's not counted for in pavement design section of providing any actual strength. What it does do is provide a solid sub base material so that when you mill everything down and have that new base, you have a solid sub base. So we would include we have not needed it in other things in the past here. If the geotech shows differently in this portion of the airport, then obviously we would.
Obviously, there's a reason it failed.
Well, for that, it would be based off of time. It's 30 plus years old, I think.
I've seen a lot of 30-year-old roads in a great condition.
Yeah.
So time is not necessarily the only factor.
No.
But anyway, I'm just curious.
So yeah, so that would, the need for that material will absolutely come out of play out of the geotech. If it shows there, then yep, we'll do a P156 cement treated base course, sub base. So that is Taxiway Charlie. The next one, Taxi Lane India. So I talked about a couple of different pots of federal money, one being the bill funding, or the AIG, that was allocated roughly $295,000, and it's that money has been saving up towards this project. Now, there's one thing to consider first. You rename India. None of your taxi lanes are named Alpha through Juliet right now.
They are.
But you don't have signs for them.
Oh, okay.
There's no actual signs out there that say turn left for taxi lane Delta. The FAA has a sign, they've updated their signage advisory circular where they now say you can't have a taxiway or anything that has a sign for India, Oscar, or X-ray. And that's because an I looks like a 1, Oscar and O looks like a 0, and an X-ray, X looks like a closed runway. So question is, as we go forward, it's just something to consider. Do you want to rename this? You've already got a couple hundred feet that leads to several hangars, and those would be the hangars in this area here that's obviously existing. And that is Taxi Lane India. But if you were ever to go down the route of labeling and naming and putting signage out there, it would be non-compliant with FAA signage based off of naming things. So something to consider, something that Dylan found this past week, so like, huh. So anyway, something to consider. But with the project itself, it's going to be the development of an additional taxi lane using this bill funding. Now, this project was actually originally started in '22, and we kind of got the ball rolling on it, but because there had been discussion with the board and there was going to be private funding that was going to be basically fronting the cost until the bill funding had saved up. We'd gotten a little bit out the going, and then it was requested by the board to stop working on that. So we did, but we had already completed some tasks. Specifically, we'd gotten the geotech work of that done. And so we have that report. So obviously moving forward, we don't need to redo that. The original design has changed slightly. We had gotten some good feedback. So kind of there originally had been a different access road coming in, but decided, hey, we'll leave the access road where it is. Ryan Snow had come up with a good idea so it changed a little bit of the design, leaving the original entrance road or an access gate. It's probably going to have some going up a little hill to drive over the taxi lane there. But with this one, we'll work on developing during this month, we'll work on developing a scope of work for this to be able to get this project going, and this will be designed over the winter and looking to go out to bid sometime in the spring. With the anticipation, talking with the FAA, of wanting to have bids by the beginning of April. So
And this is just the India yellow, not the extra?
Correct. Yeah, this would just be
that one.
just be this India. This is just a screenshot off of the airport master plan that's ongoing.
I was just clarifying that it.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, if we can fit both in that project.
That would be great, but no, yeah, this is just the India. I kind of wanted, I did a bigger picture to give a perspective of its location.
That's fine.
So, any questions on India? This project, so this kind of capping of these different projects. The paint, this is going to be a state and local funded project. The taxiway Charlie is a state and local funded project. It's a 90% state funded, 10% local. The state will be giving the airport a grant for roughly $650,000 that has been working towards. The taxi lane India, this will be an FAA, UDOT, and locally funded project. You might have heard some news that finally it was required to have an FAA reauthorization by September 30th, 2023 for the 24 fiscal year. They finally got that approved about 2 months ago. So a little behind on the federal side, but one great part about that particular, about the reauthorization is that for federal fiscal years 2025 and 26, federal 25 started on Tuesday, the FAA, instead of paying 90.63% of projects for these next 2 years, the FAA will be paying 95% of the project cost. And then local, instead of being 4.685 or 5%, it will be 2.5%. And then Utah, the aeronautics, or UDOT aeronautics will be picking up the other 2.5%. So it's great. With the reauthorization, the FAA or in Congress approved, the FAA is picking up an extra 5% of the project cost. And this project is about it's about 1.2 million. So of that, 95% of that will be an FAA grant.
Just one thing, I don't know how the rest of the board is, but I think it's easier to change now before we build the rest of India. So if we're going to make a change and eventually have signage, because I think we don't have necessarily signage, but all of our hangars are labeled with that. And
Address
so we start to address that way. And it'd be just as easy to change now if that's what they're gonna do. Might as well change now. We have just a few that'll, inconvenience now, but it sounds like a problem expands as we go.
It very well could. So option.
Some aggressive inspector that says
Exactly.
it has to change.
So there's two potential options. Like I said, right now you have Alpha through Kilo. Alpha through Juliet. So there really is Juliet that would have to be renamed if you wanted to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, J. Another option so that Juliet would not have to change.
You're saying we'd have to give this one J?
Yes. That's option one. And then you would rename J as K or Kilo. Option two, and this is actually where the airport I'm out of, I'm on 1 Charlie Alpha. So it's a similar situation. It came about for a different reason, but this could potentially be Hotel 1 Alpha or Hotel Alpha instead of India. I mean, it's your airport, you can name it as you see fit, but that's just some things that I've seen elsewhere is kind of without renaming future or having to rename Kilo, you would just be renaming India, and you could put it out of order and call India Kilo.
I say we label it J, but we call it John.
Because there currently is no Kilo. Yeah.
So there's no Kilo.
There is no Kilo.
So we could do that one.
And it would just change it a little bit, but even if we look at these right now.
Where is Juliet? I apologize.
Juliet is the large corporate hangars on the north side of the university.
So, okay. So, but Kilo would be an easy change.
It would be an easy change, and then recognize that you do have Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, but then you also, with these cross connectors, I think this back one's hotel, or I think that's hotel.
That's hotel.
Yeah. So it doesn't even go straight left to right as it is now. So it'd be a little bit off, but it might save a confusion in the future.
Just called it Kilo. So you're saying we could skip?
You absolutely could. And if by changing it to Kilo, the only thing it would do for current existing leases would be affecting, just these couple of hangars right here that are currently on India.
That would be it's always harder to change something that's already there. And then we all get used to it. And when they tell me, oh, I'm on this, I know where that's at. So my recommendation, I guess, would be if Kilo is available, then we just go to it.
Yeah,
Anyway, I realize we don't have a
support that.
majority to do anything.
Okay. And at this point in time, we can just, as we go with paperwork and designs, we'll just call it
Since we
Kilo.
don't have a quorum.
Good direction.
Okay.
Anyway.
This is another project, PAPI control boxes. This is one of those that came out of the 139 inspection. So this is zoomed in. These are the PAPIs. There's 2 red circles, the one on the right circling a little dot, and then you can see 2 other boxes to the right of the right circle. Those are your PAPIs, precision approach path indicators. These were installed with an FAA grant 11 years ago. So, I mean, these were installed according to FAA rules from 11 years ago. And the circle on the right circles the PAPI control box. And, well, the PAPI control box went next to the PAPIs, and that was fine 11 years ago. And the inspector came out in this last inspection and said, you can't have that there. You have to move it. And originally it was move it outside the runway object-free area, which goes all the way to the taxiway. So to move it, it was going to have to be drilling underneath the taxiway and just an obscene amount of work that was not the best idea. So Connor's been working a lot with the inspector on that one as well. And it can go outside of the runway safety area, which is different than the object-free area. The runway safety area goes 250 feet from center line, or basically that yellow line up there, to relocating this control box out there. It's within the specs for the specific manufacturer model that's on site, so that would be appropriate to use to move it that distance. And that was another aspect. If we had moved it to the other side of the taxiway, it actually wouldn't work from a electrical engineering point of view. You would have had too large of a voltage drop to be able to push that power. So you would have had a step-up regulator at the electric vault, step-down regulator at the control box, and then you would need another step-up regulator, and then build a control box where you couldn't have a control box due to the voltage drop. So the electrical engineering didn't agree with where they wanted us to move it, so the compromise is outside the runway safety area. And it will meet the need. So this will be another project. Because it was called out by the 139 inspector, it could be eligible, or it does make it eligible for federal funding to do this removal, or not removal and reinstallation about 115 feet away. Don't know, we have not run cost on this yet. We just got that information yesterday or Tuesday, I think it was. So we have not had time to run a cost estimate, but I would guess this might be one where it'd be in local interest to move it just for cost effectiveness, because it's probably in the.
Sounds like the state is saving 2.5%. They just added money.
Yes.
They'll pay for it.
And I think it's 100% worth asking, because it's a pretty simple project to knock out. It'd be the kind of project that when it actually comes to the field work, this would, be 10-day kind of, give them 10 days and it'll take them 2.
Well, they have more money. Let's ask them.
So.
It'd be very comparable to what they're doing now with the light install. We just trench and put in conduit and move it 125 feet. Similar to your illuminated windsock.
I pulled up the original installation plan set for this project this morning, and that power is coming along the runway and then going out. So that's the terminus of that power line. So it would really just be disconnect the system, extend the power roughly 115 feet, build a new pad, put it in conduit, turn it back on, ×2, and on both ends.
Got to do the same thing on the
Yes.
other end.
Yeah, this one's only showing, I just use this as an example, it's needed on both ends of the runway. Then the last thing that was on the CIP, the 10-year plan from last year, was snow removal equipment, which had a budget of approximately $200K for acquiring snow removal equipment. And that number had carried forward from 2 years prior. Now, before, with the previous manager, he had said kind of tabled this project because it had established a long-term contract, I can't remember if it was county or city, for doing snow removal at the airport.
With the county.
With the county. So that was from, with the prior manager, he's like, all right, we can probably hold on that, but wanted to bring it up because it was on the list from.
How long is that contract?
It's not a long-term contract.
Okay.
Um, And I think the equipment's still needed, and I think 200,000 is inadequate.
That's just it.
It's inadequate, having just purchased a snow plow.
What did you, that's the thing, unfortunately, in the last,
Number,
what?
but I said I can get you the number.
Yeah,
We
'cause
we just
As a reference, snow removal equipment
So-
we've seen obviously very high inflation in the nation over the last couple of years. Snow removal equipment in particular, for whatever reason, and large heavy moving equipment has more than almost doubled in the last 4 years. So $200,000 would have gotten you a really nice plow 3 years ago, 4 years ago, of a dump truck and a nice plow. And, that'll now buy you a tank of gas with how the prices have gone up with the cost. I mean, it's truly saying the exact same piece of equipment, over 75% increase in 2 years.
There's probably a 3-year lead time.
Yeah, most
I was
likely.
gonna say, there's at least probably a year to plus.
Right.
So,
Working with another airport in another state, we're at 19 months on a purchase at about 65%, 70% over the original estimated cost.
okay.
So those were those upcoming projects. Like I said, this will be
The
a,
equipment we have is older than you are?
maybe older than some of these guys. I appreciate that. Though. I appreciate that.
Call your age.
So, like I said, that's where the plan and what's laying out for this coming year. The FAA will be addressing these. Hopefully, the airport will be getting, so they said they would CC me as soon as they send out the invite. But hopefully, within the next week or two, we'll be seeing these, being able to sit down or schedule a meeting with the FAA. But yeah, as of 7 o'clock this morning, they're still in the preliminary stages. Any questions on the capital improvement?
Talk just briefly about the upcoming Zoom call with the FAA when much of this starts taking firm shape.
Yes. So we are actually, joke all you want about the FAA, but we being the state of Utah work with the Denver Airport District Office. And our company works with ADOs across the nation. Hands down, Denver's the best to work with. They really go out of their way to work with airports and schedule things long term. We'll be sitting down with a Zoom meeting, and it will be obviously the airport, us, UDOT, and the FAA, and going over this list. And they're shuffling around because obviously there's a lot of stuff that you have to look towards and budget for over 10 years. That office has to do it for 46 airports within the state of Utah, and then they also oversee Colorado and Wyoming. So they're trying to shuffle around the money for 150-ish airports. And yet they still take the time to meet with every single airport. It'll be about a 45-minute to hour-long call where, while it's kind of a pretty format on a website now, it's still old school spreadsheets and truly sitting down and trying to calculate out, here's all of the needs. And they really like to see things dialed in for this year and next year, but then they also need to start planning forward because they don't have, these, if looking at some of these larger projects in the distance, redoing the taxiway is $5 million estimated, and that's in today's dollars. The runway, 5.8, those are 6 and 10 years out. They don't have enough money to do that for 150 airports, but 150 airports need that kind of work. So they have these meetings with us so we can plan, because the local funds, yes, it's great to get a grant for in the taxiway, it'd be a $4.5 million grant, and that's great. But locally, you still need to come up with $250,000, and that is a large ask for a community and for an airport. So this meeting is really set aside to help develop those long-term financial planning, because airports, they provide amazing services, but they're also an expensive piece of infrastructure, and it costs money to have those local match fundings. So,
Any more questions? Any questions? Yes, Brad.
I have a few items I'd like to ask, if I could. Sorry. So, in regards to the hangar, you say that, or the lease agreements with the price, what other airports where are you getting your facts from as far as money, like what they're charging?
We were just at a conference last week with several airports. We talked St. George, Spanish Fork,
11 airports here.
Conference last week.
Yeah. And then the state does a report.
So like what would Brigham City be?
I don't know what Brigham is.
Okay. You know, like I was just wondering, like, if you're basing your stuff like off Ogden or, you know, some of these bigger places that are, you know, Class Delta airspace with commercial operations and stuff, where we're not commercial operations, you know? So I'm just curious, like, where you're basing those facts from, or where you're getting your numbers at.
Well, the average of 43 cents was from UDOT's aviation office. They've compiled statewide, little airports, big airports, an average of every airport in Utah is at 43 cents.
Okay.
Most of those don't have towers. We're a 139 airport. Most of those aren't. So, yeah, I agree with you. We're not a Class Delta. We don't have a tower, but we are a 139 airport.
Okay, so on another regards to the 139, so are you gonna go forward with trying to find, or having Utah State assist in paying for that instead of trying to tax us for it and bill us for that option where that has nothing to do with
That's
us?
the intention of the board and my stance as well is yes.
Okay. I have another question on, so when you say you're gonna tax everybody's property at the or on our hangars, are you gonna tax the ramp, tax for the ramp space in front and behind our buildings?
It's, the intention is the lot size that you occupy is what the rent will be based on.
So is that just where the building sits, or is that for the area to get to the taxiway in front of it as well?
Whatever the lot size is that you're on is what the number will be based on. So the ramp, not necessarily, it's whatever lot that the county recorder has that your hangar is on, that's what the number will be.
Okay, so like my hangar, tell me what I would be taxed on J4.
Without having the specific number, I don't know.
I mean, because basically what I'm after is if I'm paying for ramp space, Utah State uses my ramp to park all their airplanes on it.
Right.
It's not fair to me,
Right.
right? So that's kind of where I'm at. And then also with Flight Line 7 hangar that I own, you guys park all your cars behind my hangar there to assist your building.
Right.
So, you know, and if I'm gonna have to pay for those feet or those places, I don't want people parking on my property then.
That's reasonable.
Okay? So, and then you're saying that, you know, boats and stuff need to be removed. Hell, you've had your sailboat parked at the airport for damn near a decade.
Not for a decade.
Uh,
I sold it a decade ago.
Well, it's been, you're just as guilty as anybody,
Yeah.
okay? So, I'm just saying, whatever's convenient for you, I guess.
Joe? If you would address the board.
I had just a couple of things. One, the board has just approved a lease that, with barely a quorum and missing the members who were actually on the lease committee, that no one has seen in a final form, and only the board has seen in any form whatsoever. The actual people who will be the leasees have never seen this lease. So why are we in such a hurry to approve a lease that we've taken months to get to this point? Why don't we put it in its final form, make it available to everyone, have one more meeting where people can actually comment on something they can hold in their hand, not on something that Bob did a very good job of explaining, but I've read that lease, and I talked to Bob about it, but I have no idea what is added, what is taken out. I think it's a bad idea to approve a lease for people who've never seen it. The second thing is, why are we getting funding to do Part 139 work that benefits only one party at the airport, USU? If USU did not fly sports teams in here, we would not need to do any of that work. We're getting funding we could use for other projects to basically benefit one entity. It doesn't benefit anyone else. Not one person here cares if there are black lines around yellow lines or white lines. It won't make us land safer. It won't make the takeoffs better. Where are we on getting USU to pay every penny of Part 139?
I just want to address the lease part. We haven't changed the lease for anybody who has a lease. This is a lease for anybody who establishes a new lease. So what we approved today doesn't change any existing leases. Once those leases expire and are renewed, then they'll be renegotiated. But I think you make a good point about not having all of our members here, and if they would like to reconsider it, we could put it on next time. And I also think we can do a better job of getting the documents available. We should be, when we have documents like this, posting them with the agenda on our public meeting notice website and our website. So let's make sure we do that so that everybody has access to those. I think that's I think that's fair that we provide that information to everybody.
I think to clarify on this lease, it is the current lease we have with the modifications that were discussed today. I mean, it isn't an Ogden lease with everything else. It's the basis lease we have with the modifications that he talked about. That's the only changes, so that we can have those that are waiting for a lease to proceed.
That's 25% of the leases at the airport are waiting for it. That's a significant number of people. And it affects a significant number of people. So why don't we put the lease in its final form and have one final discussion on it? Is there a problem with that?
I think the lease is ongoing. From my perspective, the lease is ongoing and could be changed at 2 more meetings down the road. And as we grow, we already talked about that it could be changed as the FAA changes their rules. I see that lease is something that can change a number of times, and as we make it and improve it, but to hold everybody back that needs to be having a lease, I mean, that's not what we want.
Yeah, if our other board members want it on the agenda and they want to address it, we can put it on the agenda next time and the time after and the time after. But we have a lease that's approved right now that can be used. So we can move forward.
And it will be posted in its final form. Aaron, you had an item.
It's just an update. Judd and I are on the State of Utah Electric Subcommittee, was Electrification of Aviation Subcommittee, and then I'm on a subcommittee or whatever there, and just letting everyone know that we're in the top 3 of the first airports that the state's going to look to try and get electrical supply out there, and so our airport improvement plan, or our what was it, master plan, should include some wording and knowledge of electrification of aircraft there. If so, then that helps with everything there, and just want everyone to know that we're out there working on that to try and get that so electric aircraft can have charging here at the airport. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll be adjourned. Currently scheduled to meet November 7th.
Sorry, I'm gonna get that to you before. Gotta make things
I was
difficult,
here,
don't I?
and so was she. 2/3 of the lease committee were here.